sounds to me, bottom line, like in a lot of ways, the issues that we struggle with as fish keepers, whether it be nitrates or, trying to keep the tank from becoming toxic or polluted. It seems like we inadvertently or unknowingly, or just through, like you said, we know the temperature and we know we know those other parameters, but we have no idea on what some might argue is the most important component. What is this fish processing through their body? We may be actually bringing about the very things that we are the most worried about in keeping our fish. And I see, yeah, you're so right on that, especially like the salt keepers. They have it. They have the every micron of every down to the absolute infinitesimal bit of phosphate. They know how much they have, and yet probably if you did that same quiz on them about calories, they would just sort of scratch their head and go, "Well, the bag had the Moorish idol on it, so."
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even when we say, we start talking to the freshwater hobbyists who are into the planted tanks. I've asked the same question to a group of underwater scapers, just the planted guys, and these people, they really know. They know all their CO2 injections. They know their fertilizers. They have all very, very, I would say intermediate to expert levels in terms of chemistry. And we posed that question. I remember there was one guy who knew it because he was a personal trainer. And he goes 9 grams in I don't even know if I ever told you what it is.
Yeah.
So in protein, there's 4 grams of 4 calories in a gram of protein, 4 calories in a gram of carbohydrates, and there's 9 calories in a gram of fat. So you can very easily, if anybody has a package, even if you just look on the back of it, if it's 42% protein, you go 42 times 4. If it's whatever is your lipids is 10%, 10 times 9. Your carbohydrates is whatever times 4, and that will give you enough calories. And that's, again, as I mentioned earlier, you really need to take that with a grain of salt. One of sort of the what I kind of call our one of our real advantages is that we service 3 very similar and very different markets, being zoos, public aquariums, the aquarium hobbyists, but then also aquaculture markets. And where we focus on the aquaculture, again, is on broodstock, so maturation diets, and then also larval diets for first feeds. And, it's just some of these larger aquaculture facilities, they have the ability, to really conduct some in-depth, feed studies and research. And what was really interesting, we were doing a study with a government trout hatchery, and they were looking at improving the quality and the quantity of their broodstock, how many eggs they were producing. They outplant rainbow trout to several hundred lakes, and they were using our pellets. And what was interesting was, on nutritional analysis on the bag, on the label, I shouldn't even say on the bag, this is actually sent off to an independent lab, so we got exactly what was in our diet and versus the control diet in this experiment. Our diet had less protein and less lipids in this particular case. It also had half the amount of ash. We had a little bit more carbohydrates than the other one. Yet the broodstock produced twice the amount of eggs eating our diet than the control diet. And then the offspring survivability, which is what they call post-ponding. So once a little trout, consumes this little yolk sac and becomes free swimming, it was 1 week post-ponding, the survivability was up 35% on those fish that were fed our diet.
That's huge, huge.
So, yeah, we have a postdoc researcher who's actually finishing writing the manuscript for her thesis on this whole research. So like, I'm not allowed to steal her thunder, so to speak, with the community yet, but there's going to be some really, really fascinating
Yeah, it's like we're back to the, we have to, it seems like we have to think in terms of the net, you know, the shakeout of, okay, yeah, I might have more of this or that, but if the species, the fish is working and, you know, expending energy and calories to handle junk, you know, like you look at, and this, I guess, can be also translated to humans where, you know, the kid is eating, like you said, the sugars and the empty stuff, the body's using energy to process that, then there's not energy for other things like the development of healthy organs, healthy eyes, be bigger, stronger, taller, faster, whatever. So it all makes sense. And you've covered so many of these questions already, and you sort of, I had 11 of them here, but you've already hit like on almost all of them. But let me just scan these and see. I mean, you've talked about percentages of ingredients. You've talked about what sets Piscine apart, which is very eye-opening for me. Let's see here. There seems to be you know, we see trends or fads in the fish food industry, and we see big players coming out with your prebiotic and your probiotic foods. Do you care at all, without necessarily calling out any other brand, I guess, would you comment on your thoughts on pre and probiotic foods? And if you think this is something of value, or are we just really looking at a sort of fad in the food industry, a buzzword or a marketing ploy of some kind?
I think, well, there's scientific evidence that shows the benefit of probiotics. It is how some manufacturers are, let's call it reporting the scientific evidence and trying to say, here's the benefit of probiotics, and we throw probiotics in there. My question is, how is that food manufactured? When were the probiotics going in there? At what temperature were those probiotics exposed to? Is there a certified lab analysis that you can give me that can show me the activated amount of probiotics that's in there from a certified lab that we could verify that, right? The concept is absolutely valid, absolutely. It has been successful. We've seen a lot of advances in this, even in commercial aquaculture, who really have the big bucks to do this research and investigation in it. But again, it comes down to the claims that the companies are being made, that are being made, right? Are they opinions or are they fact, right? And you know, I can say right now, we do not have probiotics in our diet. Will we introduce it? Possibly. If we have an activated probiotic, can we introduce it into our pellet and not compromise it? We sure can. We can do that with lipids, which is one of the most sensitive thing, right? But you know, without letting too much out of the hat, everyone needs something new to hit the market with, and who knows what the 2021 can hold, 2022, who knows? But
do you have any, and again, without letting the cat out of the bag, as they say, not sure if that's a saying up in Canada, but
oh, it is.
It is, okay, without disclosing any trade secret, do you have any foods on the horizon that we should be on the lookout for that you think is going to create some buzz or excitement in the hobby?
Yeah, so you know, it's kind of interesting. It's like you know, you mentioned the word kind of like food fads. What comes in, what comes out, right? And when you go back to, our fundamental product, which is our frozen PE mysis, it's been the same product for 15 years. And it's just a matter of our goal as a company is to increase the removal of the mysis shrimp out of the lake. The government wants us to remove even more out of the lake. We've developed new markets for that, and I say new products like our pellets, right? But it's also, again, it's a sharing. Our goal really is educating the market, and I think through educating a market, and it's even with our frozen or with our pellets, and we have some larger pellets coming out. Right now, large is like a 3 millimeter pellet. We actually already have larger pellets that we supply to the public aquariums, and those are available in larger buckets. But like a 3 millimeter stick, a lot for more, even like carnivorous fish. So very popular. Those pellets are fed to some really neat, South American stingrays, to pacus, to peacock bass, all sorts of neat stuff. But it's really our frozen. What's kind of interesting we found is our frozen business, for the most part, over the last decade, has really been more to saltwater hobbyists. And since the launching of our freshwater or the pellets, you've had a lot of hobbyists who would walk into the aquarium store, go into the shelf, see PE pellets, go to the store owner and say, "Hey, I've never heard of Piscine energetics." And the store owner goes, "You've never heard of Piscine energetics? Don't you know about PE mysis?" And they go, "What's PE mysis?" "Oh, let me show you in the freezer." Whereas, for most store owners, they know who we are. But store owners are busy. They got umpteen thousand SKUs. But, a lot of people, when they look at it and getting right back to price again, say like our blister packs. Our blister packs are retail price point, twice the cost of any other blister pack in the freezer. But the popular, say, brine shrimp, bloodworms, even other mysis that comes from overseas, any one of those blister packs has on average about 30 calories in that blister pack. And ours has on average, because the nutritional analysis of the mysis actually changes throughout the season, but our package, that same blister pack, would have about 100 to 120 calories. So there's actually 3 to 4, let's just even say conservatively, there's 3 times the amount of calories in our blister pack, but our blister pack is not 3 times as much as a pack of bloodworms. A lot of people don't realize PE mysis blister pack is the greatest value in the freezer available to any hobbyist in the fish store.
But I bet without some type of large notice on the top of it, because I probably made the same mistake when I bought the frozen mysis products.
Yeah.
You go in and you drop the same number of cubes in, and
Yes.
all of a sudden you're giving them too much. So there probably should be some type of a label that says, be aware that this is more nutrient rich.
1/3, yeah.
Yeah, you should probably feed less. And otherwise they get, oh yeah, I tried mysis, but my nitrates went up. Well, yeah, you were probably feeding twice the amount or 3 times what you needed to be feeding. And interesting.
And also not all mysis are created equally, right? So again, the mysis that we harvest from is coming from a clean glacier-fed lake. You'll notice on our packaging and our literature, there is no reference, discussion, or disclosure of our sterilization process because there is none. We don't need to gamma radiate, UV sterilize, or ozonate our food. It's what we call certified specific pathogen free. And for the aquaculture world, we supply to, say, shrimp farms, which are extremely concerned about the biosecurity of their facilities. And our product is, certified by independent labs. University of Arizona is like the leading shrimp pathology lab in North America. You don't have to worry about that risk of introduction of viruses. And as well, as I mentioned, we're harvesting our mysis when they're feeding on this phytoplankton at nighttime. So there's a tremendous amount of digestible phytoplankton in the mysis shrimp. And that really is one of the real secret sauces for, a lot of Tanganyikan and Malawi and Victoria breeders, that our mysis shrimp has that digested phytoplankton already in them. And so, we work, a lot of the public aquariums that we work with, and particularly like the AZA, like the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the accredited ones, they have what's called, their species survival programs. So one of the big things they have is the FULU, and they have this whole program of saving the FULU. And, with those cichlids, most of the institutions are now exclusively using our frozen PE mysis, to increase the fecundity of those fish. So if there's any breeders out there that haven't tried our product, there's my sales plug. I can't twist your rubber arm, but I just want to make sure you're getting the best value for your money. So next time you go to a store, ask your store owner of your favorite local fish store if he knows what the greatest value is on frozen food in his freezer. And then
I'm going to do that.
Make him a bet, and if he doesn't tell you, if he's wrong, then you tell him to just give you a free pack.
I'm going to start quizzing everybody I run into. And so a thing that you see people talk about, and I just want to get your opinion on this, and my head is like sort of jammed with what you're telling me, because it all makes sense. If you buy 100 pounds of something, but you're only going to use 20 pounds of it, is 100 pounds a better value than the 50 pound of the? I mean, it's all making sense, and I'm very impressed that you're pulling it from a source that doesn't have a plastics factory upstream. You know what I mean? It's like, this is really important that you're pulling it from a pristine source, and the fact that there's phytoplankton in the mysis. So you really can't list it necessarily as a green, but it's sort of part of the organism that you're including it. It's a very interesting to me, because again, having concentrated in the last few years, and I am going to be diversifying when I redo my fish room, but having been concentrating on a type of fish that is notorious for bloat, and where our solutions have been to fast them, or maybe 1 day a week give them spirulina pellets or something, to just try. But now here we have a food that may have this actually sort of built into the food itself in a way that is just really interesting. But what are your thoughts? Just a quick, kind of maybe an easy question for you, but and I know my opinion on it, but some people talk about pre-soaking pellets before feeding. Do you think there's any value in that in your experience?
Good question. So for clarification, are you thinking just like regular feeding, or like at any given time, like pre-soak, or are you talking about like soaking them in a like vitamin, or soaking them in if you're medicating, or?
No, that would be a different thing. This would be, for example, I have a good friend of mine who's on YouTube, and he feels that one of the reasons that he's been able to avoid some of the digestive issues with his fish is because he'll take a cup of tank water and put the pellets in there, and then dump, after maybe a minute or two, then he dumps it into the tank, and he says that that's a softer, easier. Me personally, I feel that the pellets get soft the second they go into water. They start to soften up right away, and by the time they get into the fish's gullet, it's pretty much a soft product. So I've never pre-soaked, but there is sort of a a pre-soak group and a just drop it in group out there among the pellet feeders that I run into. I just wanted to get your take on it. Apparently it's not something that's been on your radar that much, I guess.
It's, I can say the only time I know some of like our public or institutional clients, the only time I ever hear them soaking is if they're medicating. Sometimes they'll soak it in medication, something like that.
Right.
Because one thing is our pellet does have such a low moisture content, it can absorb water really quickly, and it can soak some stuff up pretty good.
In my experience, I mean, you drop it in and then grab it real quick. It's pretty mushy, pretty fast.
Yeah. So, but no, like I could say, I'd say the bulk of our product probably is fed out to large facilities and institutions, let's call it. And they're not pre-soaking, they're just dumping it right in, right? Just kind of scattering in. But, you know, there's a hobby. We're in the world of tinkering, right? It's, you know, how many times someone's into cars, how many times you need to open up that hood again and do something, or if you're into RC cars right now, right? Like my 9-year-old son, he's like, oh, let's change the wheels. I said, we just changed them yesterday. Okay, I'll help you, you know, so whatever it is, right? Like, you know, it's that's a great thing about this, you know, it's part.
Well, again, we might be talking about maybe just a momentary fad or something that's kind of coming through the community as a wave, but and I don't want to water down I get pun intended, I guess. I don't want to water down the conversation from the substance that you brought to it, which is what you're talking about really is so important, because we're talking about the real true value of the food to the fish. And as we're talking, it's answering questions for me. For example, fish who can go for years and never really fatten up, yet they eat a lot, but they don't fatten up. In some cases, the fish I've had for years that even had a little bit of a concave on their stomach, eat like pigs, have no parasites. I've even treated for parasites. I put them back, they're fine, and they eat like crazy. They're healthy, they're active, they have color, but they never really fatten up. They never really, and it would seem to me that again, I mean, back to that title I'm kind of throwing around about how we're fish nutrition idiots, I think, in some ways, when we compare it to how we watch our water parameters. So
yeah, you know, that it's really interesting. You know, you just reminded me of something, and I'll just share it here because I'm sure you have, you know, some people following on your channels, you know, that have big tanks, a lot of fish. You know, and cichlids like to eat, and, you know, pellets, everyone's trying to always look for the greatest value. And, you know, you look at some people saying, oh, I can buy a 50-pound bag of this readily available commercial fish chow and I'm going to feed it. Well, the number one protein source right now going into commercial fish chow is chicken feather meal.
Chicken feather?
Chicken feather meal is one of the most popular proteins going into aquaculture diets right now.
That doesn't even make sense to me.
No.
Yeah.
But you look at these major companies, look at the Cargos of the world, the Tysons of these worlds, you know, they're all intertwined and they're all, you know, growing chickens. What are they going to do? And they're just, you know, they're so vertically integrated. And you get chicken feathers and you grind it down, it's very high in protein. Now, is that protein biologically available to a fish? Is it absorbable? Now, there's a very difference between available, absorbable, and going back to one of my first comments, we're not in the business of fish growth. We're in the business of fish health. And another study we've actually been doing with a government agency here is they've actually been looking at the effect of feeding these readily available diets And the reason I'm mentioning this to the cichlid community, because I know I've had this conversation with someone who's doing aquaponics, and he's doing tilapia, but he also is a big cichlid hobbyist, not far from me. And I had the same conversation. He's like, I never thought about this. What they actually found was that these fish are growing so fast, eating these poultry byproduct meals, or the poultry byproduct is like lipids and these chicken feather meals. What they actually found was there was fat deposit developing around the brains of these fish. Now, if you have a fish in a hatchery environment, and sure, you're raising them to sell off, and then you're going to keep some, and then you're going to spawn them again. They then look at the offspring survivability and correlate that to these fat around the fish's brain. And so when people are looking at spawning their cichlids and really looking at that, I just cannot stress enough the value of that nutrition. You have to pay for it somewhere. Nothing's free. So whether you're feeding them a cheap diet, you're going to do more maintenance on the back end. You want to feed them a cheap diet, you may not get them to spawn. You may get them to spawn, but your survivability is not going to be great. You may get them to spawn, you may have a great egg hatch, and then they all die, right? And it's really looking back, the food is the fuel. If you have a high performance sports car that needs premium fuel with 94 octane, and you decide, I can save 10 cents a liter. We're leaders here in Canada, I can save 10 cents a liter. I'll put in the stuff. Oh, you know what? I'm just not getting the performance, right? It's really, that's all I'm here to do, is educate and present facts that I can present. And I know, and full disclaimer, I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm not a veterinarian, just a very curious hobbyist, we'll call it, that happens to own a fish food company.
Well, and so much knowledge. It's funny to me that, and interesting to me that innovation and very often comes from outside the box. That very often the folks who are in that, and this is not a knock on that area, but sometimes the folks that are in the box of academia, that's where they operate. And someone comes from out here and says, wait a minute, have you thought about how these pieces fit together? Have you thought about how the nutrition is affecting the willingness to spawn and the viability of the offspring? And anyway, it's something that to me is so transferable to humans. Where where a lot of our diet is really based on labeling, packaging, marketing, and the last thing that we think about is the bioavailability, the nutrition, the things of this nature. My wife is, I'm kind of blessed in that I have a wife who is really into this, and she would be listening in here, nodding her head the whole time. It's like, yeah, that tastes good, but you get nothing out of it. And you're going to spend more energy chewing. And 6 years from now, you're probably going to have a tumor.
So funny you say, it's like I was invited to a webinar to listen in on as a business group. And the gentleman giving this talk, his talk was called "Ignorance is Bliss." And he's going in there, and I related so much to this, and it was really talking about innovation and ignorance and not having any preconceived notion. When people say to us, Piscine, you're in the frozen food business for so long. You came out with this pellet. What was the success factor? What's your unfair competitive advantage? And what we always say is, as a company, we're in the fish nutrition business for a decade. But when it came to dry food manufacturing, we were completely ignorant as a company. We didn't know anything. Even as a fish food, as a nutrition provider, I always thought fish meal is whole fish meal, right? And we went out there and we weren't We didn't have this preconceived notion. We weren't going out and we weren't going to say, okay, we're going to go buy an extruder. We're going to start popping pellets out. We're going to throw our label on and we're just going to compete on price. No, that doesn't align with our values. What we're going to do is we're going to go out there. We're going to create value. We're going to provide value for hobbyists. We're going to provide value for the environment. And we're going to provide value for people. And what I mean by that is we went out there and saying, hey, you know what, we're going to remove mysis shrimp from the lake. We're going to rehabilitate native fish populations in the lake. We're going to help others breed fish, some CITES listed fish. And we're going to minimize waste to justify that value in everything we do. We're not going to pack 20% water in our packages. We're not going to pack 20% ash in our packages, right? And it goes right back to even our frozen. You know, we're dealing with people overseas. When we really start to get into this, and I mentioned, you know, in terms of our blister packs, you know, like the 3-to-1 ratio, in like our big bulk packs, which have, you know, they're packed much, much more dense, the calories that we can put in, say, a container, a 40-foot container of our product versus, say, brine shrimp, one container of brine shrimp is equal, sorry, one container of our PE mysis is equal to 5 containers of brine shrimp. So when you really want to look about the carbon footprint and what's that happening. So if you have brine shrimp, which is originating overseas, coming to North America, packed in a styrofoam box, put in a blister pack, right? These are the type of things we really need to ask hobbyists ourselves, asking it to aquarium store owners and the products that they put in their freezer, and ask them, what are you doing as a store owner, as a distributor, as a hobbyist to help promote sustainability within the trade, right? And this has really stemmed a lot with our involvement with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and, you know, really looking at, you know, their concern about how many styrofoam boxes, you know, if I could say, if there's one thing I could change about the industry I'm in, you know, and we've tried every single alternative, how do we eliminate styrofoam boxes to keep product frozen, right? But at the end of the day, at least I know I'm very comfortable that I can go to an aquarium and I can say, you know, a lot of times we're filling out our packaging and like all these RFPs and all this stuff and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're using styrofoam boxes, but, you know, there's 4 to 5 times the amount of calories in this styrofoam box of PE mysis than there is in any other food you're getting. And, you know, we really use that, and they appreciate it, and they go, wow, well, you know what? That means we only need to bring in 1 pallet versus 5 pallets. We only need to store 1 pallet in a freezer versus 5. We only need to, and it goes on and on and on and on, right?
And our water changes can be once every 2 weeks instead of every week.
Yeah, just
and 20%
right?
instead of 40%. The it's an upside down model compared to the profit. How can we maximize profit and then try and fill in below that versus how can we maximize quality and then fill in below. It's a different approach
it's
and on so many levels. Now